Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. We're going to be taking a look at lesson number 2, which is actually a really important first step in our design process, and that's putting together a base plan. So there's a number of things that we'll want to consider, and we'll just hop through a few examples as well. And yeah, let's share screen here and just take a look at the lesson itself. Oh, we're not quite where we want to be. There we go. All right, so let's take a peek at that assignment. So this this lesson, unlike a lot of them, we have two sort of equal priorities with the assignments here. We have a base map and a client survey, and although the base map's probably going to get a much more of our attention today, I would definitely say that the client survey is a very important step in this whole process. And it may be obvious, but you really need to know what your clients, A, you need to know a little bit about your clients, and B, you need to know what exactly they want, or you're just going to be floundering, so to speak. So I must say, in my earlier years of designing, we didn't have a client survey, and often things worked out well, but on occasion you might get a little bit blindsided if you're just designing really for yourself. And I guess in some ways that's how it was in my early days, but certainly having a really good feel of what your client wants is vital. And I'll probably show you our questionnaire. So it's pretty similar to the one in your template file here, which I should just bring up, and we can take a look at that as we go. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the base map. And let me just get my chat going here. Sorry, got a couple of things I should share this link. Go. That's our sort of Q&A document there, if anybody wants to utilize that. We had a question from Heather, and I thought it was a good one, so I put it in the Q&A document for everybody's benefit there. So we'll take a look at that. But basically, the base map is that first layer that we are going to look at, and it's absolutely critical in my experience that we get this as accurate as possible. So I have had experiences in my earlier days when I kind of rushed a base map just so I could get on with the design. And then later on, it can rear its head if you have some inaccuracies there, especially if you're looking to design something and then build it. The more accurate it is, the better. And it makes it much easier to try and go to that next step. So we'll cover that off a little bit today. So what we want to really do is just take your project site, and we are going to, in essence, we're taking a snapshot of that, what's currently located on the project site in this moment. So that could be a number of things, and there are some elements listed here. I'll just get my little spotlight tool. There we go. So some of the obvious things would be the project name or the site, Your name, that's important to keep on each design sheet. So you'll probably see that we have, let me just get to the base map here. There we go. So you'll see at the bottom here, this little block of information, that's called the title block. And this should be on each design sheet that you do. Not every assignment will have design sheets, but when you're putting out a graphics like this, you'd want to be consistent. So you want to have the project title, address, or coordinates, you know, the rough area, which you may or may not know. Pretty easy to figure that out with Google Earth, though. I can show you that. The GPS coordinates, if you have those, which again, that's fairly easy to get off of Google Earth. Your name and date, and that's an important thing to add because you may have multiple renditions or versions of a single drawing, and the date will help you quickly determine what is your most current. So this and the scale, very important, and a north arrow. So this is sort of the, you know, a consistent bit of information we want to carry into every design sheet you have. Okay. So if we go back here, so that covers off, you know, the first 6 items that is being asked for. And then that gets a little more obvious. You know, we obviously want to know if there's any structures on the site. And some of you may or may not, but occasionally we get a student who has a we'll call it a raw piece of land or bare piece of land, and they want to design the land with a proposed building footprint, and that's what I would suggest you do. If you have a piece of land that doesn't have a building on it, just place a building footprint on it where you think that would work best, and then an access to that, like a driveway. So most of you will have structures, so you can put that in. It's also helpful to know the roof layout and where the water is heading with each of those, and that'll become more obvious when we get into lesson number 5. We're going to be going to be taking a deep dive into water, and that's actually one of the harder assignments that you'll have, and that's right before we take a little bit of a break, a summer break. But again, that's good information to have on your base plan. Any roads or pathways, so any access that's existing, not what you're thinking about putting in there, but what is existing. And utilities, those are another really important item to add, whether they be underground or above ground. So telephone, water, sewage, you know, sewer line, or what else could be there? Stormwater may also be another item that is transported out. And yeah, so we've covered overhead and underground, and then contour lines. So we want some basic idea of the contour information for your project site. And I can show you today, you know, a way of getting that. It's not the most accurate. It's not what I would use for professional purposes, but it is something that is really helpful for this course, just so we can focus on the exercise rather than the specifics here. So maybe we'll do that right now as we're going along. So if we have a project site, and if you're in Oregon, you have access to a lot more contour data in terms of GIS data, LiDAR data, than certainly where I live, I have some access here, but you need software to convert all this. But often you can find these in existing maps. So I'll show you one thing, just where I live here. So wherever you live, no doubt you're going to have something very similar to this, which is some GIS mapping here. And these are all somewhat similar but different. And let's just say that it doesn't really matter where we are. You can get close to your project site. And what you'll notice is there'll be a layers tab here somewhere. All of these maps are just slightly different, so it's not going to necessarily look like this. But as you can see here, we can get 20-meter contours, we can get 10-meter, and all the way down to 2-meter if we're zoomed in enough. So there we go. So I will click that. Now 2-meter, for those who aren't familiar with metric, is over 6 feet. So it's not very, well, we'll say it's not very high resolution. So this wouldn't really be appropriate for a project. Let me just find. Okay. Just zoom in a little bit. Sorry, between Zoom and this loading might take a little bit. So that's one of your possible resources, is looking at, so say you're in Portland. So Portland, just typing in Portland interactive map will probably give you what you need there, and you can see the contour lines are showing up. But these are 2-meter, so they're very, very, they give you an idea of the lay of the land, but they're not going to be quite enough unless you're on a much larger land base. So that is one of the ways you can go about this. The other is a software. And I see Jennifer has a question. I'll get to it in 2 seconds, Jennifer. This is the town I live in. And let's just, again, this is a very basic way of doing it. And again, it's great for this course, but I wouldn't be putting a whole lot. It's not going to have the accuracy that you want for a client. So what we do here is we just get ourselves centered. Let's say our project site was in this corner, and we have these options here we have to go through. First of all, I want to put it on, even though we're in metric in Canada here, I still like 1-foot contours. We're going to do these level intervals. So I want a contour interval every 1 foot. And after we get that info, you just click in the top left and bottom right area, and you can adjust this. Let's say I want to make it a little wider, and then you just go and you say get data. And then we have these contours generated with a legend on the right here. And you can tell that the darker the blue, the lower they are, and the more orange and red are higher elevations. So if you had this kind of map and this is very busy, it's hard to see through it, maybe I would change this to 2 and ask it to redraw. There we go. So we have some 2-foot contours there. So if this was my project site, I have some rough contour information I can use there. So Jennifer has a good question here. She's got a flat urban site, and elevation is elevation enough to specify? Yeah, regardless of your project site, and you're quite right, urban locations have traditionally can have less elevation change, but they're always going to have some. So you definitely want to access the information even through the contour map creator here and get that. And you'll need that for lesson number 5 for sure. But it's one of those basic things you want to add to a map. And as you get more and more familiar with permaculture design, you'll realize that it plays such a huge role knowing where water travels, because that's one of the things that we can tell with this map. If I have water dropping here on the site, these contours are actually indicating to me where that water is going to travel across the landscape if we get runoff. So that's just one thing. And again, that's quite important. If we found that we weren't getting enough information here, I can change this to a 1/2 foot contour, and then I have to say get data again. And you can see it's rather an ugly event here. But that's giving us a lot more resolution. So on acreage sites, you'll probably not be going after 1 foot contours. You'll have to decide what is kind of a happy medium there. And yeah. So let me see here. So yes, Jennifer, highly recommend that you go through and find yourself some contour data. What software website is that? So this is, oh, I see Embry put the pasted in that link. Thank you very much for that. So yeah, contour map creator. Aside from that, depending on your location, you can look at interactive mapping. And I believe that, like in Portland, the interactive mapping will give you 2 foot contours. I can't swear on that, but I have a pretty good idea that is the case. So you might want to look there. So between the two, this here is actually a lot more accurate than what we're viewing on Contour Map Creator, because this is all based on Google Earth, and the resolution is very broad. It's not refined at all. Whereas this information is taken from LiDAR data, and so it is more accurate. It's just for my situation here, this wouldn't be very useful because of the contour intervals, but at least it's something. All right, so that covers off. Any other questions about the contours at all, anybody? And I guess one thing I didn't include, let's say you are using Contour Map Creator, and this is your project site. You could basically take a screenshot of this and then put that into Google Slides or whatever software you're using for your base plan, and just trace these, right? And then make sure you do label a few of them so we know A, what the interval is, and B, what direction the slope is. So let's take a look at some of the other items here that we've got. We are being asked to include fences. That's kind of obvious. Waterways, so you might have a ditch or riparian zone coming through your property. And that's very important to include. The spigots on your house, that's not a bad idea. Now, where I live, we have a separate irrigation system. So this would be kind of a non-issue, but we have other points in the landscape that we can access water. So that would be something to include. A well, If you have a well, we'd like to know where that is. If you have a septic field, that would be good to point out, as well as the septic tanks, because we definitely don't want to be designing things that would be counter to the production of that. And the same with your wellhead. You don't want to be, trying to infiltrate stormwater right next to your wellhead or something like that. Existing vegetation. Yeah, we do this on all our designs, but what we do is we will go after significant existing vegetation. So really it's trees and shrubs and all the herbaceous or perennial items that are existing on a project site. We'll make a list of it and take some photos where they're generally located, but we're pretty much assured that we'll be at least moving most of the herbaceous plants when we get to that. Just seems to be the way it goes. Trees and shrubs, we evaluate that, and I'll try and find example of that for you right now, actually, because it's something that will come up for some of you. Sorry, I'm just looking for a file here.
Hi, excuse me. I need to check. I have a wholesale account there, and I just need to check that my resale certificate is up to date. And if not, where do I send that?
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't hear everything you said. Can you try that again?
I think she might be on the phone.
Yeah.
I do. 604. I know that part. Hold on 1 second. I'm looking in my
Jamie, if you might mute her.
right there. Okay. Oh, there's my permit number. Where's my UBI number?
There we go. Okay. Multitasking. Let me just see here. Yeah, I'll see if I can bring up. Okay. Yeah, this might be. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to switch over. And through the course, one of the things that we naturally have occur is I'll be showing you some of the deliverables of what my wife and myself produce. And you'll notice it's, they'll have some similarities, but differences between what you're doing here. Now, what I wanted to show you in this diagram, next lesson, we're going to be looking at sector analysis or sector compass, but I just wanted to show you with this particular drawing. This is part of a base plan. So these are existing significant plant material, trees and shrubs that we have placed on the drawing. And you'll notice that they all have slightly different outlines. And with the software we use, we will go through and identify each one and basically apply some action to it. So this outline indicates that that plant is going to be left alone. It's going to be as is, and we are going to work around it, right? So it's an asset we want to keep. You'll notice that this dashed line here, these are items that we are going to remove. And there is another type of, I think it's this one right here, sorry. Another type of outline that we use where we are going to keep the plant, but we're going to relocate it. So that's sort of the process we go through when we're looking at existing plant material. We document it all, and then we we kind of loosely think, okay, is this healthy? Do we want to work around it? Is this going to be appropriate for the overall design? And we discuss that with our clients. Sometimes they'll say, well, for instance, in this case, there's a big Douglas fir tree here very close to the house. Unfortunately, it's not a good fit, wasn't a good place to put it. So it's going to end up going. So yeah, that's just, don't want to get too deep into what we're doing, but that's an example of how we itemize our existing plants. I can maybe for next Q&A, I can show you a different example where we had one project where we had literally, well, I think there were hundreds of existing plants that we had to document. And that was done in a slightly different way, but it basically ended up with symbols on a drawing and a spreadsheet with sort of codes that relate each plant to the symbol on the drawing. It was very complicated. It was just so be aware of that. If you're starting a design and there's lots of existing plants, it does take a little bit of time to document all that. Let's see here. So if we continue with that list, we have legend and keys. So if we are adding, let's just go to this example here of a base map. So if we are adding these symbols, we want to have an idea of exactly what they were, right? So if you don't know specifically what these trees are, this is a good general thing to start with. They're either deciduous or they're conifers, or perhaps they're a hedge or shrub, or maybe you have a big patch of a forest, right? So I don't know if you can see it in this case, but there's an outline right here. So this looks like it's the edge of forest, not the best. That's going to disappear on me. So everything this way is mixed forest, right? So that's actually a pretty good way of depicting a big block of forest. It's just like with a cloud, like a polygon that has some fill in it and has some opacity, so you can still see through it and you can see the contours below. But this is where a legend or a key is very useful. And there's a lot of different ways of doing this. So the advantage of this for everybody here is if you do a legend, you know, your labeling on your base plan is fairly discrete. So you got to imagine on our next lesson, and all the lessons that follow that, we're going to be adding layers, design layers on top of this. So we don't want a whole bunch of labeling here. That's going to distract from our design. So this is a very good way of helping with that visibility. With more sophisticated softwares, you can easily control what you're seeing on drawing. But if we're, you know, in this instance, your base plan will be visible in every single one, right? So that's something to be mindful about. And you got property boundaries, you know, put those in as accurately as you can do so. And easements, and those are important because especially in urban situations, easements are often placed there, and there may be an easement that allows, say, the municipality or the city to come in and oops, I'm just going to have to close my door. Sorry, just 1 second. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Yeah, so easements are very important. Often we find those in city or urban centers, and again, they may be giving the municipality or the town access to sewer lines or water lines, or so you'd want to be very aware of those and not be planning for anything permanent to sit above them. We have a question here from Embry. Do you have any suggestions as how it's best to layer the base map on top of a contour map? Yeah, well, it's much easier as you get into higher quality softwares for what we're looking at here, or even say you're doing your work by hand, which is completely, I would encourage people to do that if you're not familiar with any of the softwares, but is just trace it. That's the easiest thing to do, right? That helps you, Embry. But yeah, it's hard with the tools we're using to change opacity easily or to change what's visible on a drawing. I'm just going to start up my software here, and we'll let it load. It'll take a little while, but I'll show you. We're building a base map right now, and I can show you the process that we're going through. A few things you might want to take into account is if you're not really comfortable with doing this on a computer, please just do it by hand on you can use grid paper, you could use any paper you want. And then you can use trace paper on top of that for all of your new layers. So that's a really easy way of doing it without having to dive into this this whole new learning curve with software. But if you have an iPad, this is one of the better, this is a software I recommend people consider if they're wanting to do some more design work. Because if you have an iPad and an iPencil, this is great. It is very intuitive, well, pretty intuitive. There's lots of free training videos online, and you can make quite a nice product. And you can control the different layers, the visibilities. So it really does help on many levels with your work. And this is something that you could use beyond the class if you're wanting to design for others. And it's a really low cost. I think it's like $30 a year, something like that. It's very, very low cost. I'll show you here what I use, and I wouldn't recommend anybody doing that right now. I use Vectorworks Landmark. I've used it for, I don't know, 27 years, and it's very powerful. Can do all these 3D modeling, it's quite amazing, but it takes a fair bit of time and energy to learn this. So if you ended up designing full time, this is a great investment, but it's not inexpensive at all. It's quite expensive, and you need a robust computer. So there are some advantages and disadvantages, but that's one software we use. The other is QGIS, and that is an open source free software that I wouldn't recommend diving into it right now, but you can take LiDAR data from that's, freely available in most areas. And you can extract information from that. Very, very useful. Pretty difficult learning this. It's not intuitive at all. I know how to do the things that I want to do with it, but yeah, so we basically use that. And what is the other one we're using here? Figure out the name of it. We don't use it very often. I'll have to come back to that. Oh, there it is. Okay. This one's called Cloud Compare. It's another open source. So we bring point cloud info into this and convert it, then send it to the QGIS. So if you're using a Mac, you would have to probably use this before you plop it into QGIS. So again, there's a lot of time and energy going into learning this stuff, even though the software is free. So I wouldn't, I would say, maybe put this in a reference for later, because we don't want you to spend all your time and energy learning software. So if you wanted to do something that had a computer flavor to it and didn't want to spend too much time on the learning end, I would say this Morpheo Trace is a great approach. Aside from that, I would definitely go with a hand-drawn. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's some beautiful examples from other students that we've had, and yeah, that's definitely a good way to go if that works for you. So the final item here is just other major important features that you consider when developing. So what might those be? Yeah, significant features. Yeah, so let's take a look at some examples. This is a good example here. And I just see I got an email here, and I'm sure you all have. I'm just going to flash it up on the screen here, because you might want to check this out. One of our instructors, Jaan Designs, is offering base map clinics during the week. Okay. So he's got, I'm sure you have this in your inbox, but he's got he's got 2 clinics running, one on Wednesday, one on Friday. So Javan's a wonderful person and incredible instructor. If you feel like you need to see the process done, or you'd like to watch that, I'd highly recommend it. Yeah, it's a 2-hour, you wouldn't have to stay for the whole thing, but yeah, I would check that out. And just bear in mind the time zone, and you can convert that to your own. But yeah, I would highly recommend that. It's been certainly successful in the past. Javan's put those on before. He was responsible for coordinating this whole template, so he's very familiar with that. Right, back to our file here. So again, this is a nice base plan to start with. And one of the things that you'll find invariably that happens is we're in a landscape orientation here. So the page is wider than higher. If you were designing for somebody and they had a long, skinny lot and or a more slender lot, and north up just didn't seem to be a good fit for this page size, you would naturally shift the page and go to more of a portrait style. Now, unfortunately, with the templates, we're locked into this format. So there's a huge advantage in keeping all of your maps in a north upward orientation. And it is a graphic standard that's pretty much, as far as I know, is a global standard. Even people, designers in the Southern Hemisphere place their maps in a north up orientation. And when you get used to this, it's wonderful, because just by looking at this, inherently we know the bottom of the drawing here, this is southern exposure, right? So without going too far, we know there's a big forest tree line here. Wow, that's going to have quite an impact on the shade, especially in the winter with this property. Now it does slope down, so that's going to really help. But it's just this inherent thing that you would want to get yourself used to doing if you can. Even if it means you're orientating the drawing in a weird fashion and you think, wow, I've got so much space left on the sheet here I'm not filling. One way of looking at that is, and you'll notice as we go along, let's use the next lesson as an example. You can see here how much map to the rest of the sheet, the spacing, like you need a lot, you potentially may need a lot of space for your labeling. And so this is very handy. And so just something to consider. You don't have to, nobody's going to force you to do anything, but having the north up is a really important thing. And I can't stress that enough. The other reason it's great for me is if I have to look up your property on Google Earth or Contour Creator, and you have your project oriented in a different manner, it gets quite difficult for somebody that's not familiar with your site to spot it on Google Earth. So yeah, so that's just one other thing to consider here. I seem to be taking up a lot of time on the base map, although it's a huge piece. And again, if you're feeling a little apprehensive about it, please take up Javan's offer of his little sessions there this week. Those would be invaluable, I'm sure. So the second part of the lesson here or assignment is really all about the client survey. And again, this is a really important piece because we need to know, well, what's on the site, of course, but more importantly, what is the landscape that you're designing is not yours, it's for somebody else. So we need to know what they like about it. They may like things that you think are, not so great, but it doesn't really matter. It's their landscape. So what is it they like? What is it they dislike? What concerns they might have for their existing landscape. Often we never get called to beautiful landscapes, it just doesn't happen. There's always some, well, we'll call it a problem. There's something that's problematic with the existing landscape, and that's why you generally get pulled into these projects. They want to fix something. So the like and dislike is a huge part. You also want to know what your client's vision is. If you could wave a magic wand, what would it look like? And we've certainly had some clients that say, I have no idea. I don't know what I want, and I don't know what I want it to look like. It's just I don't like what it looks like now. And they may have seen some of your work and gone, wow, I like what you do, but I don't know what I want you to do here. So tread with caution. you'd certainly want to be very careful how you move forward when it's unclear how that's going to roll out. But again, the client survey is a very, very important piece. We'll just take a quick peek at that. And the one we have for our client is very, very similar. And this looks very basic. You want a little snapshot about the people, who's the decision makers, right? And this is for multiple. And then an inventory, what do they have? And then perhaps what do they want, right? They may have a well and septic system, but they want to collect rainwater as well, right? So the desired is a really important side of this whole inventory. And again, what they like most and what they like least. And I'd say you'd want to keep this sort of in the macro. You don't really, it wouldn't be something like, well, I don't like violets that are purple. I like them yellow. That's not the kind of detail you'd be too worried about at this stage, maybe later. But so these are very broad, right? And some of the top concerns and goals, right? So typical goals might be low maintenance and year-round interest and high level of food production. So that's where the low maintenance may have a little bit of a challenge. But again, this is a really important piece. And if you are, after the course, if you're designing for others, you want to try and incorporate something like this into your process. All right, so here we have some resources, right? So how to make a scale bar. There are all kinds of little resources here. You may want to check out, again, Javan's offer. There's more resources at the bottom. And you could probably spend many, many moments just looking at these. So, try and sort out early whether you want to do this by hand or you want to do this using some computer apparatus of some description. And just think, this can all change in time. If you're continuing to design after the class and you find you want some different tools, well, that's when, a good time to explore these, but they all take a lot of time commitment to learn. And I know that the software that we run, typically it takes about a year to get comfortable with it. So you don't want to go there today, but it may be a good fit for you later on. And then here's our rubric. So please check this out. This is what I use to grade all your work. So you want to make sure you include all this. And yeah, that's it for going through that lesson. We've gone through that. Maybe what I'll do, I have a few minutes left here. We didn't go through the question. Okay, so Heather's, this is a good question that some of you may find happens to you. And in Heather's situation, she has a wooded lot with a small homestead, and she's struggling with creating a base plan with this information, right? So you definitely want to have contour data as part of your base plan. I'm just going to open up a drawing that I'm currently working on here, and that may help. It's going to be similar but different. And I'm not sharing this to show you what you should be doing. It's just, it's one way of dealing with larger areas here. So this is the beginnings of our base plan on a new property that we are designing. And there's a number of components here, and we can control the visibilities of that. And I'm not going to get into that today with you, but let me just turn off. There we go. So we had a drone survey done, and it was a LiDAR drone survey. So they will take high definition images. So this is a high definition set of images that get stitched together. And we love starting this way because this, I think this is a 2 or 3 acre site. And as you can see, there's a lot of trees and a little bit of clearing. The clients had done some clearing back here recently, but this is a great place for us to start because I can map a lot of this without having to do on-site measurements. So you can see I can even zoom in and clearly see the septic tank lids, and there's a little pond here and all sorts of things. The driveway. So that is that's awesome. If I back out here and let other parts of the drawing get shown, you'll see
What
we
it's
have.
telling me is you're not safe anywhere.
Oh, sorry, was that
You just zoomed in
Christopher? You
so
have a
far.
question? Oh, Christopher, was that a question? Oh, there you go. Sorry, man. Okay. These are 1 foot contours, even though they are being shown in metric. And we have a property line here that I won't go through every little bit. Maybe I'll just turn that off. So this is the beginning, and what we have started, we put in our property lines, right, which is a very weird property line. We have sort of the access entry established. We have the building footprint, a deck here. We have a little bit of a lawn area that connects here. This is where their septic is located, right in here. So that's where we are at the moment. And we definitely want to put in some indication about the forest. So going back to Heather's question here. So if I turn that back on, you can see there's a pretty heavy conifer forest here. I'm going to turn off my contours. So what we typically do here, instead of showing every individual tree, we would just do like a cloud effect. So what would that look like? Well, I won't start drawing here. Yeah. Well, here, I'll just do a little bit just to give you an idea. So I would just go on the outer edge of the wooded area. And this is not accurate. And let's say that ended here. So I would just come back and join that up. And then I would give it some solid color. And let's say it was that color, and then I would give it some opacity and make it a little different from the lawn. So maybe it needs to be a darker green. So that it could be as simple as that. So for Heather, you may want to consider that. Now, for myself in this particular software, I can take that shape and turn it into something else. And that's typically what I do And I will show,
Jamie, really quickly, what is this software you're using?
it's Vectorworks Landmark. Yeah, so here you go. So I make this a cloud, and you can see how that's changing the outer edge here. I can turn this off. And then I can give it some fill. Let's make it a darker green, and then I can change the opacity. So long story short, for Heather, this is kind of where I was going with showing a wooded area. That's one way you can do it without having to do individual trees. So yeah, you don't want to have to put every individual plant in there. So in the end, I'd be just turning this image off, and I'll end up with a base plan. You can see it's not complete. There's a lot of things I don't have here. I may want to include the neighbor's location, right? So there's a house here. I may want to include that. And looks like there's a little outbuilding. I might want to include this pathway because this is public here. And yeah, so you just have to look at some significant elements that are both inside and maybe directly outside of the property. And start with that. So again, when we're all said and done, it should be fairly evident when you're looking at it what things are. And again, this is rough and we're not quite there yet. So, all right. So we are getting near the end of our hour here. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like me to address while we still are on the call here?
I haven't gotten to all the resources listed in the lesson, but I'm confident it's there. But is there something to help in creating the borders of the property, or is that just a kind of trace and overlay and do your best sort of situation?
So the property boundary?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you're doing this for a client, we like to start with a legal survey. So that line that you saw on the drawing I was showing you, that came off of a legal survey. So we know that that's the boundary. Now, we don't know how that's georeferenced. So I don't know if that's its exact location in time, but I know it's pretty close. So we're not worrying about any fencing on this project or anything close to the fence. So I'm not too concerned about that. Most of the time, yeah, guessing is fine for this course. For a client, you want to avoid guessing things as much as possible. One of the things that you can also find on interactive maps, like I was showing earlier, is that there is a layer or a setting for property boundaries. So they'll often show you in a district interactive map where approximately the boundaries are. So that's helpful. I've also had districts or areas send me like Google Earth property boundaries. So you can import them into Google Earth and they'll be shown in that setting. But it really does depend. I wouldn't, I'd be as accurate as you can be, but you wouldn't want to be spending a huge amount of time on this particular step in the process for the lesson, right? You certainly want to be bang on when you're doing it for a client, especially if it's an urban site and you're looking at, working up close to a fence or new fencing. So that's where a legal survey can be helpful. But, where I live, that's often what gets exchanged when there's a property transaction. People will end up with the plot plan, and often it'll show the building footprint, and that's a perfect situation. If you have the footprint versus the boundary, then it's easy to map on a base plan, but it's also easy to go out to the site and then start measuring there. And we didn't really get into that today, but often we'll have to do on-site mapping, right? And I don't really enjoy that too much, but some people do. And it's really just triangulating from fixed points, when those fixed points are often a building. So if you're trying to locate, if you don't have an overhead image and you're trying to locate existing trees and shrubs, you can take 2 points off of, say the front of the house. If your garden in the front, you're trying to document, and you measure a given plant from both corners of the house, then you'll be able to position it on the drawing pretty accurately. But you know, basically with what I do, I try and get plus or minus a foot, and with elements, not with the property boundary itself. But yeah, so I hope that helps. Is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about or have questions answered, or totally up to you? We're right at 10 here. Okay. Well, oh, sorry. I don't know who that was. I didn't hear your question. But feel free to repeat it if you'd like. Okay. Well, if I think that's it for today. If anybody does get stuck, check the emails that have been circulated from Javin, and check out his sessions there. He's a fantastic instructor, so I'm sure you'll pick up a lot from him if there's some items that you're unclear of. So yeah, well, if nobody has any other questions, I want to wish you all a great week, and really look forward to seeing your base maps next Monday. Yeah, you all take care, and thank you very much for. Oh, you're welcome, Jordan. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jamie.
And Cody.
Have a good week.
Yeah, you too, and you take care. Bye for now.